Story 1. My daughter appeared at midnight, bruised. Mom, help me. I called my in-laws, but my husband coldly said, I don't know. Enraged, I confronted them and revealed a shocking truth. They turned pale and trembled because, Mom, please help me. My daughter, who had just gotten married 3 months ago, suddenly showed up at my doorstep in the middle of the night. What on earth happened? When I saw her, her face was swollen and covered in bruises. I was speechless at the sight of my daughter's changed appearance. Then, as I listened to her story, I trembled with anger. This is unforgivable. Was his promise to make her happy all a lie? And I vowed to get revenge on those people who had done this to my precious daughter. I'm Susanna, 50 years old. I divorced when my daughter, Leighton, was still young and raised her while working full-time. Although Leighton is a reserved type, she has a strong heart and is a hard worker. Through her persistent efforts, she managed to get a job at the company she had always dreamed of. Leighton's presence has been my motivation, helping me move forward even in difficult times. So when she told me, there's someone I want you to meet, my heart fluttered with joy. The person Leighton introduced me to was a man named Carter, who worked at one of their client companies and was 7 years older than my daughter. He looked dashing in his suit and greeted me cheerfully. He seemed serious and sincere at first glance. I've come today to ask for your blessing for Leighton and me to get married. However, barely after introducing himself, he suddenly came out with such a statement. Leighton was only 23 at the time, and she had only been dating Carter for about 6 months. I had expected to just meet her boyfriend, so I was honestly taken aback. Well, you're both still young. Don't you think it's a bit early to be thinking about the future? I gently tried to discourage them, but he straightened his posture and looked me straight in the eye. I can't think of anyone but Leighton anymore. I believe I'll never meet another wonderful woman like her. He pleaded with a serious expression, telling me how much he cared for my daughter. Carter, I feel the same way, Mom. Please give us your blessing for our marriage. If you two have already made up your minds, then I'll support you. Moved by his passionate feeling and hearing Leighton's plea, I gave my consent for them to be together. Thank you so much. I promise I'll make Leighton happy. As I watched my daughter and him gazing at each other happily, I couldn't help but smile too. However, after Carter left, I couldn't fully rejoice in their marriage, and an uneasy feeling started to well up inside me. Is this really okay? Isn't it too soon? But I've heard that all parents have mixed feelings when their children get married. They looked so happy together. It'll be fine. After that, we met Carter's parents, and things progressed smoothly towards the wedding. They were both only children. Carter's parents, who had always wanted a daughter, seemed to really like Leighton. Mom, I'm thinking of living with Carter's parents after we get married. While it's nice that they're fond of her, it seems they've suggested living together. Are you sure about this? I don't have experience, but I've heard that living with in-laws can be challenging. I get along well with his parents, and with Carter there, I'm not worried. Well, I'm sure you can handle it. I thought that she, being sincere and always loved by her elders, would surely manage. Besides, his family home was only a 20-minute drive from my house, so I felt reassured that I could rush over if anything happened. And so, after the wedding ceremony was over, my daughter's new life in her in-laws' home began. I thought Leighton must be eagerly working hard, but about a month after she moved in, changes started to occur. The daily messages from Leighton stopped coming, and even when I sent her messages, I rarely got a reply. I didn't want to interfere too much, but I was concerned, so I decided to call her cell phone. Mother-in-law, what's the matter? To my surprise, it was Carter who answered the phone. Could I speak to Leighton? She's in the bath right now. Don't worry, she's doing fine. His tone was soft, but somehow left no room for argument, and I ended up hanging up without hearing my daughter's voice. After that, there were still no messages or calls from Leighton. I decided to go and see her in person. Carter's mother had told me to come visit anytime, so I went to Carter's family home on the weekend. Carter's mother responded through the intercom, curtly telling me that Leighton was out with Carter. I'm sorry for coming suddenly. Do you know what time they'll be back? When I asked this, all I got in response was a big sigh. You should call before coming. I don't know when they'll be back. Feeling that she had a point, I couldn't say anything more and had to leave Carter's house. I wondered if I was worrying too much, but it felt like Carter and his mother's attitudes had changed from before the wedding, and I couldn't shake off this bad feeling. After much deliberation, thinking I'd feel better if I could at least hear her cheerful voice, I called Leighton's workplace. To my shock, I was told that she had already resigned. Moreover, they said, we're in trouble because she quit so suddenly. There's no way Leighton would quit her job like that. When she received the job offer from her dream company, we cried tears of joy together. Besides, Leighton was excited about balancing work and housework, so it didn't make sense for her to suddenly resign. Something is definitely wrong. But what should I do? Even if I visited Carter's house again, I wasn't sure if they'd let me see Leighton. And while I was debating whether to contact the police, the incident occurred. It was 2 days after I learned about my daughter's resignation. In the middle of the night, suddenly the doorbell rang. What? Who could it be at 2 a.m.? Suspiciously, I peeked at the intercom screen. It was dark, and I couldn't see clearly, but from the figure, it looked like Leighton. I ran to the entrance and hurriedly opened the door. What happened? I've been so worried because I couldn't contact you. Mom, I'm sorry. My joy at seeing my daughter was short-lived. The next moment, I was shocked and lost for words. Leighton's face was unrecognizable, swollen, and covered in bruises. What on earth happened to you? You're in such a state. For a while, my daughter trembled and cried, and I just rubbed her back without saying anything, trying to calm her down. Leighton began to speak haltingly, her voice choked with emotion. As I listened, it became clear that immediately after the wedding, Carter's attitude had changed completely. He said, "You've come here as a wife, so you should serve us," and treated her like a slave. And this terrible state she was in was the work of Carter and his parents. I had suspected as much when Leighton came running to my house, but as I heard the details, I trembled with anger. I didn't want to trouble you, but I'm sorry. Seeing my daughter cry like this, I felt a desire for revenge against them well up inside me. I want to make them suffer the torments of hell. I vowed in my heart never to forgive Carter and his parents, who had promised to definitely make her happy, but had hurt my daughter so much. For now, I let Leighton rest and decided to confront Carter's family once daylight broke. The next morning, we first went to the hospital to have her injuries treated, and then I drove with my daughter to their house. As expected, they were in an uproar, having noticed Leighton's absence. "So you took her after all?" Carter's father shouted angrily when he realized it was me at the intercom. "Can you explain why Leighton is in this condition?" I asked sternly, unfazed by his response. Next to me stood my daughter, her cheeks still swollen, with bandages on her wounds, looking pitiful. Seeing this, they seemed to become conscious of the neighbor's eyes and led us into the house. The three of them appeared to falter for a moment, but soon showed their true colors. Carter's mother glared at Leighton and said with a sneer, "We were just disciplining her a bit because she wasn't working properly." "What are you saying?" "And Carter, didn't you declare that you would make my daughter happy?" "Well, that was on the condition that she fulfilled her role as a wife properly, but she was too preoccupied with her job. That's why I submitted her resignation letter for her." Leighton hadn't quit her job voluntarily. Carter had submitted her resignation without her knowledge. She tearfully explained that by the time she realized it, it was too late. Apparently, the reason was that Carter didn't like that Leighton's work had become busy, and she was coming home later than him. Leighton was working hard because she was happy to be employed at her dream company. That's not my concern. If she can't balance both, she has to quit. Carter spoke as if he had done nothing wrong. He's right. The other day, it took her an hour just to make dinner. She can't do a single household chore properly. Even Carter's father joined in the attack, and my daughter's shoulders shook. If that's the case, couldn't Carter's mother have supported her? However, Carter's mother crossed her arms and said in a strong tone, "When I came here as a bride, I was made to do everything and told to learn through experience." That's right. It's generational change, but I was watching over her properly, Carter's father said as if to say they had done nothing wrong, and they nodded at each other. Apparently, Carter's mother had pushed all the housework on Leighton while doing whatever she wanted. Moreover, Carter's father, who had already retired and was at home, had been constantly monitoring Leighton, interfering with everything she did. They had even taken away Leighton's phone to prevent her from telling me about this, and when I visited their house, they had restrained her to prevent her from going outside. And this wasn't all. Leighton believed that Carter would change someday, that he would help her. Despite the terrible treatment, Leighton's hope that Carter would change was in vain. The treatment from her in-laws only escalated. They made her eat leftovers and, claiming it was a waste of gas, barely let her use more than a trickle of water for showers. When Leighton, unable to bear it anymore, told them, "This isn't right." It led to the unbearable injuries on her body. In response to my daughter's objection, they called her insolent and slapped her hard on the cheek. Not only that, saying they would re-educate her, they took turns beating her all over her body. Finally released while covered in injuries, Leighton felt her life was in danger and, waiting for the moment when all three were sound asleep, fled from her in-laws' house. She walked for over an hour, barely escaping with her life, before arriving at our house. Before the wedding, you treated Leighton preciously. Why did you change so much? I can't accept this. When I confronted them with a strong tone, the three looked at each other and smirked. From the beginning, I just wanted a wife who would obey me. I thought Leighton would make a good servant. Carter said this nonchalantly, and his mother sighed, saying, "She was really disappointing." Well, she must have learned her lesson from this incident. Why don't we give her another chance? At this unbelievable suggestion from Carter's father, they looked at each other and burst into laughter. That's enough. I can't forgive this anymore. Before I could respond, anger welling up from every part of my body, Leighton stared at the three of them and spoke out. "How dare you speak to us like that?" When an angry Carter tried to grab my daughter, I quickly restrained him in a hold and pinned him to the floor, immobilizing him as he struggled, and his parents stood dumbfounded at my quick movement. I said, "I didn't mention it before, but when I was young, I was on the verge of making it to the Olympics in wrestling. I had to give it up due to an injury." I increased the pressure on Carter, who was pinned down, and he started flailing his arms and legs with tears in his eyes. When I loosened my grip, he slumped down, sitting weakly. How pathetic. Now, who should I deal with next? I said, cracking my knuckles as I slowly approached his parents. Please stop. They covered their heads and started trembling violently. I sent my daughter off wishing for her happiness, but I will never forgive you for putting her through this. All three of them shrank back completely at my fierce demeanor. Carter, please divorce me, Leighton said, following my lead, and presented the divorce papers in front of Carter. What are you talking about? I absolutely won't divorce you. He refused, his face turning red. This morning, I took my daughter to the hospital and got a medical certificate for her injuries, and I've also filed a police report. We have no fault in this, so we'll fight this to the end, I told them, slowly looking at each of the three in turn. Then, this time, sweating profusely from their foreheads, they started panicking, crying out things like, "Please stop," and "What about our reputation?" I want a divorce as soon as possible, Leighton said, looking at them with disgust. I look forward to seeing what happens to you now. You'd better regret what you've done. We gathered Leighton's belongings and headed for the entrance. Wait. We heard Carter's pitiful voice behind us, but Leighton and I left her in-law's house without looking back. After that, the divorce was successfully finalized, and Leighton claimed $20,000 in compensation from Carter. The police report was also accepted, and the three of them were questioned by the police. Although they were released soon after, I heard that the police also came to their house to inspect the scene, which became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood, and they were now being looked at with suspicion. When Leighton told her former colleagues about the mistreatment she received from Carter, the news spread to his company, which was their client, and Carter was removed from the fast track to promotion. Meanwhile, Leighton slowly healed her mental and physical wounds at our home, and then started moving forward to find a new workplace. My life is still far from over too. In fact, I've started training because I want to get involved with wrestling again. Story 2. My husband left me in labor on a mountain. Give birth there, he said, taking my phone. 6 hours later, in 104 degrees Fahrenheit heat, he returned asking, "Is it born?" The police's words left my husband speechless. I was in labor during a visit to the cemetery when my husband coldly said, "Why don't you just give birth here?" He then forcibly took my cell phone and drove away in the car. The temperature that day was over 105 degrees Fahrenheit. I was left stranded in a remote graveyard with no way to call for help. Pushed to the brink of despair, I couldn't understand why my husband would do such a terrible thing. As I was overwhelmed by pain and fear, I suddenly realized something. My name is Taylor. I'm a 33-year-old housewife. We're in our 3rd year of marriage, but early on, I had envisioned a hopeful future with my husband, Niall. On weekends, we used to go shopping together, cook, watch movies, and spend peaceful time together. I felt genuine love and trust for my husband, believing that our vowed love would last forever. However, that illusion was shattered when I became pregnant. For some reason, my husband, who had been affectionate before, suddenly turned cold. He started helping less with housework, and when I tried to talk to him, now would coldly say, "I'm tired from work. Don't talk to me." I was confused by his attitude, and my anxiety grew day by day. When I asked him why, he shouted, "Pregnancy isn't an illness. Don't be lazy and do things properly by yourself." Since then, he stopped caring about my health or feelings entirely. Even so, I tried to mend our relationship. I thought maybe it was because he said he was tired from work, or perhaps he was just overwhelmed by the sudden reality of becoming a father. Believing this, I made an effort to prepare meals every day and do as much housework as possible, even when morning sickness was severe. But every time I saw Niall's irritated glare, I felt the image of his former kind self slipping further away. As these days continued, the baby in my belly grew steadily, and that was my only support. "We'll meet soon. I love you so much," I would always say, caressing my growing belly. But even when I gradually started preparing baby items, my husband would still click his tongue in disapproval, and sometimes I'd even find them thrown in the trash. For the sake of the baby, I felt I had to avoid divorce at all costs. While part of me wanted to believe that Niall's attitude would change once he saw the baby's face, he started throwing things at me if I defied him even slightly. Seeing him like that, I gradually became unable to resist. As I entered the final month of pregnancy and my due date approached, one day Niall suddenly said in a commanding tone, "We're going to visit the graves now," and started getting ready. "I feel like my stomach has been tightening since this morning, so I'd like to rest at home," I said. "Can't you even go to visit graves? Or are you saying you're not interested in my family's graves?" he retorted. "That's not it at all. I didn't mean that," I said, feeling scared by Niall's sharp glare. I couldn't speak up any more forcefully. Unable to defy my husband's orders, I had no choice but to do as he said, so we headed to the remote cemetery in Niall's car. In the scorching heat, an awkward silence filled the car, with only the music from the radio echoing emptily. "All right, we're here. Get moving," he said, dragging my heavy body. We headed towards his family's grave. However, my body was already exhausted, sweat pouring from every pore, and I felt short of breath. The temperature that day was over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and even the mountains, which should have been cool, were stifling and suffocating. If I could just get through this quickly, we could go home. That's when it happened. Ouch! I had felt pain in my stomach even in the car, but now a sharp pain like nothing before shot through me. Surprised by the pain, I crouched down on the spot. Niall must have heard my voice, but he kept walking ahead without paying any attention. I tried to call out to stop him, but only a faint voice came out of my mouth. "Niall, please, my stomach hurts. I think I'm in labor." I expected my husband to help me when I said that, but he just stopped and looked at me with a cold face. His eyes showed no trace of love or concern for me. "Please take me to the hospital right now. Why don't you just give birth here?" he said with a smirk, looking down on me. My heart sank to the depths of despair. What? This baby is his child too. I never imagined my husband would act so cruelly. "I have things to do after this, so figure it out yourself," he said, forcibly taking my cell phone from my bag. "Wait a minute. What are you going to do with that?" I asked. "It's punishment for using pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework. Reflect on it a bit," he said, smiling faintly as he put my phone in his pocket and got into the car. "Please wait. Don't go." My desperate cries echoed through the mountains as my husband drove away. I was left on the brink of despair with no way to call for help. As heat haze rose and the sound of insects pierced my ears, I tried to seek help somehow, but my body reached its limit, and I lost consciousness. 6 hours later, suddenly a phone rang. "What's this? You secretly bought a new phone without telling me." My husband's angry shouts echoed through the hospital room. "So did you give birth?" "This is the police. Your wife has passed away." Caught off guard by the unexpected person answering the phone, Niall lost his earlier bravado and could only stammer a response. "Please come to the hospital immediately." A few minutes later, footsteps approached rapidly down the hallway, and my husband burst into the hospital room. "Are you the husband? Who are you? Are you with the police?" Niall looked suspiciously at the woman in the room, who was in casual clothes. "I'm your wife's friend, Jennifer. I received a call from Taylor asking for help. So I went to the mountain cemetery. She explained the situation to Niall. I rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, we were too late. Jennifer lowered her eyes sadly and bowed deeply in apology. Behind her, on the bed, lay a figure with a white cloth covering their face. Why was my wife, who was in her final month of pregnancy, alone in such a place? I don't know. I couldn't ask her about it. This can't be. What about the baby? I'm afraid the child also. Niall started sniffling, then began to cry, saying in an anguished voice, I can't believe Taylor is gone. Are you sure you have no idea why Taylor was at the cemetery? Jennifer slowly raised her face and asked him with a solemn expression. Of course not. I wasn't told anything, he replied. I see. Then please look at Taylor's face. The moment she gently removed the white cloth from my face on the bed, I could tell my husband gasped. After staring with wide eyes, frozen like ice, for a while, Niall finally managed to squeeze out a voice. No wonder. I was staring at him with my eyes wide open. You're alive. Yes, I am. Thanks to you. The baby was born safely and is doing well. Actually, before losing consciousness, I realized that the phone my husband had taken from me was an old one. So I had called my best friend, Jennifer, for help. Then I safely gave birth to a baby boy at the hospital. Just as I felt relieved to be saved, anger and sadness over my husband's actions were swirling violently in my chest. So I decided to cooperate with Jennifer. But the police answered the phone earlier. That was Jennifer. We set it all up to trap you. After you abandoned me in the mountains. My husband's face twitched for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. I didn't do anything like that. Taylor must just be confused, he said, turning to Jennifer with a smile. I would never do such a thing. I was worried about my wife in her final month and was looking for her. How can you lie so shamelessly? I said. Taylor, you've been through a lot, but I'm so glad you and the baby are safe, Niall said, now taking my hand and acting like a good husband. I shook his hand off with all my might. That's enough. More importantly, there's someone I want you to meet. At that moment, the hospital room door opened again, and a woman entered. Belle. Niall's expression froze instantly, his eyelids twitching with a mixture of surprise and fear. In contrast, the woman called Belle smiled at him with composure. I didn't come here to see you, she said. Huh? What do you mean? He asked. I came to see my sister and her friend, Taylor. That statement changed the atmosphere in the room completely. You were cheating on me with Belle, weren't you? When I showed your photo to Jennifer, she said you looked like her sister's boyfriend, so I asked her to call her here. Jennifer, who had been living abroad until recently, didn't know Niall's face well, so when I showed her the photo again, we were surprised by this unexpected development. There's no such evidence. Niall looked around nervously, trying to cover it up somehow. I thrust Jennifer's phone in front of him. Are you still going to deny it after seeing this photo? It was a lovey-dovey photo of Belle and Niall, and what's more, he wasn't wearing his wedding ring in it. I was shocked when I heard the story from my sister, Belle said. If I had known you were married, I would never have dated you. It's the worst to make me your affair partner, so I decided to cooperate with your wife. Belle, who was also a victim like me, clearly expressed her feelings with tears welling up in her eyes. I'm surprised to think that the affair partner was my best friend's sister. No, it's not like that, Taylor. You're the only one I love, Niall said, panicking at my accusation, but Belle wasn't going to stay silent either. I'll never forgive you for deceiving me. Belle took out her phone and pressed play. What came out was my husband's voice saying, Belle, I love you. Let's get married. What the hell is this? Why did you record something like that? Niall clenched his fists, and his lips trembled. Belle glared at him hatefully. As soon as I heard from my sister, I contacted you to confirm if it was true. Then she played the rest of the recorded audio. It was Niall getting carried away saying terrible things like, my wife will be gone soon, and I left my wife in the mountains. I plan to treat it as a missing person case. My husband turned pale and started shaking violently. Too bad your plan to kill me failed, I said. All of you are making a fool of me, he shouted, trying to forcibly take Belle's smartphone, but she smoothly dodged him. You always think you can just take things from others and everything will work out, don't you? She said. This is all nonsense. I've never met this woman before. It must all be made up, my husband yelled, losing his temper despite being in a hospital room. Hospital staff were peeking in from the hallway, but he was too excited to notice. So in your mind, it's all lies. The affair, the recording, abandoning me in the mountains? Shut up. You be quiet. Having his pride deeply wounded by being trapped by me, whom he had looked down on, he seemed to have lost his reason. Audio can be easily fabricated. There's no way that could be evidence. Do you think the dashcam footage isn't evidence either? The moment he heard my statement, Niall froze, his mouth hanging open as he took time to understand the meaning. The dashcam should have recorded everything perfectly. Niall hurriedly turned towards the door, trying to run to the parking lot to hide the evidence. But Belle quickly tripped him, causing him to sprawl ungracefully on the floor. We've already extracted the data, I said. Realizing it was hopeless, my husband turned back to us. The recording earlier was a lie, I told to reassure Belle. I was really planning to go pick you up right away. Please believe me. He prostrated himself, but there was no way I could believe him now. You didn't contact me for 6 hours. Why did you do this then? Cornered, Niall started crying profusely. Because I wanted to be free. Having a child just costs money, right? And you started slacking off on housework. Like a small child throwing a tantrum, he kept making excuses while pounding the floor. I was just playing around a bit with Belle. I never seriously intended to marry her. If I got divorced, it would be gossiped about at work and affect my promotion, right? I thoroughly despised my husband, realizing he was a man who only thought about himself. Please, let's start over, he said, still clinging to me even at this point. Does he think he'll be forgiven just by apologizing? It's too late, I answered quietly in a low voice. Niall looked utterly surprised, his face showing an expression of despair. No way. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a hospital security guard entered the room. The staff must have called them because of my husband's commotion. Please, this is just a marital dispute. There's an explanation for this. My husband desperately resisted, but he was dragged out by the large security guard. As silence once again enveloped the hospital room, I unconsciously shed tears of relief, and Jennifer gently rubbed my back. Thus, I was liberated from my past suffering and decided to walk a new path in life. A few months later, my divorce from Niall was finalized. Thanks to the evidence, I was able to stand in an overwhelmingly advantageous position in court. Niall, who received a guilty verdict, is now atoning for his crimes while paying us $30,000 in compensation and child support. With the help of Jennifer and Belle, my son and I are gradually regaining our happy days. My son is growing up healthy, and smiles have returned to our lives. Through this experience, I've decided never to sacrifice myself again. No matter what difficulties may come, life is full of unpredictable events. Even so, I will carve out my future with my own strength, without entrusting my life to anyone else. Story 3. My husband moved out immediately after hearing my terminal diagnosis. No way I'm taking care of you. Fight the disease alone, he declared. 6 months later, 1,000 voicemails came, but I ignored them all. Then, something unimaginable happened to my husband. I don't want to take care of you. Fight your illness alone. My husband glared at me coldly when I told him I've been given 1 year to live. From that day on, he ignored me and eventually moved out without a word. I was stunned by this treatment, as if all the years I had spent caring for his mother meant nothing. However, 6 months later, I received 1,000 voicemail messages from my husband. When I ignored them all, he did something unthinkable. It was finally time to settle the score. The memory of being attracted to my outgoing and sociable husband, Richard, and marrying him seems like ancient history now that I'm 58. I quit my longtime job as a pharmacist and spent 10 years from age 47 caring for my mother-in-law, who lived with us. She gradually became unable to use the toilet on her own and needed care day and night. My father-in-law always had an apologetic look on his face and bowed his head to me as I helped with the care. Thank you always. I don't know what we would have done without you. I couldn't have managed on my own. It's better with 2 people than 1. Let's rely on the doctors, daycare, and helpers as much as we can. Of course, there were tough times, but I researched available support systems and cooperated with my father-in-law. However, my husband never helped, saying caregiving is the wife's job, and instead started coming home later and later from work. He hadn't even been involved in raising our own children, so I suppose he had no intention of helping with caregiving either. Richard is sociable, but that's just his public face. He prioritized work, socializing, went out drinking, and never did anything around the house. My father-in-law, and I repeatedly asked Richard to help care for his mother, but he wouldn't listen at all. Then, 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away peacefully. I was with her at the end, and my father-in-law tearfully expressed his gratitude to me. After the years of caregiving ended, and I was finally catching my breath, Richard suddenly announced during dinner with my father-in-law, "I'm retiring at 60. I'm turning down the re-employment offer and quitting work entirely." Hold on a minute. The retirement money won't be enough to pay off the house loan if you retire at 60. I'll find a job too, so let's work together until we can manage the payments. I hurriedly tried to stop my husband, but he got angry. "What? You're telling me to keep working like a horse? You're treating me like an ATM. There should be job openings for pharmacists, and I'll start working right away too. Don't be ridiculous. You've been a stay-at-home wife all this time, taking it easy, using caregiving as an excuse. How self-righteous. You can work alone and pay off the loan from now on." My husband yelled, banging on the table, making the dishes rattle and nearly break. "But I gave up the job I love to care for your mother. You don't have to say it like that." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. If it weren't for her, my wife wouldn't have had such a peaceful end. "How dare you say such things when you did nothing?" My father-in-law raised his voice defending me, but my husband ignored his words. After that, I begged my husband several times to reconsider retirement, but in the end, he turned down re-employment and quit his job. 3 months after Richard retired, he still hadn't told me anything about the company procedures or his retirement money. At a loss, I started poring over job listings looking for new work. Then, one day, I got a call from the hospital where I usually had my checkups. They said, "We need to discuss something important, so please come to the hospital as soon as possible." Hearing the doctor's serious tone, I hurried alone to hear what they had to say. The doctor I always saw told me, "We found a serious illness. You don't have long." After caregiving, now illness? Everything went dark before my eyes. One trial after another was hitting me with no time to catch my breath. After my mother-in-law's passing, on my way home from the hospital in the evening, I trudged back with heavy steps. When I got home, my father-in-law seemed to be out. My husband was lounging in the room next to the living room watching TV. Richard's face looked cheerful and in a good mood. If I'm going to talk, it has to be now. I let out a small sigh and sat down next to him. "I just went to the hospital we always use. They called me in. It seems they found a problem in my health checkup, and well, they've given me 1 year to live." As I approached the subject, my husband, still lying down and not even looking at me, clicked his tongue. "I'm at a good part in this show," he spat out irritably, making a shooing gesture with his hand. "But honey, they said I only have a year left. They told me my condition will keep getting worse, and I might become bedridden." As I desperately tried to explain, he turned just his head to glare at me. "Huh? What did you say? I don't want to take care of you. Fight your illness alone." My husband got up with a loud noise and started walking to his room. "Wait a minute. This is important. Please listen." "Shut up." As I clung to him trying to explain, Richard yelled and shoved me away. I hit my head on the hallway wall and collapsed on the spot from the pain shooting through my neck. From then on, my husband ignored me. Even when my father-in-law tried to talk to him, Richard rejected even his own father. Then, about 2 weeks after I received the terminal diagnosis, I came home from shopping to find the house empty. My husband had moved out without saying a word to anyone. Moreover, all the valuables were gone, including the jewelry I had bought and treasured since I was single. Does this mean I've been abandoned? Remembering Richard's words, I gritted my teeth. I felt betrayed, but considering our future living expenses and loan repayments, I couldn't leave my husband as a missing person. I asked for help everywhere to find his whereabouts. Gradually, Richard's terrible secrets came to light. How could he? I can't believe it. I'll never forgive him. Furious, I continued to track down my husband's whereabouts, determined to get revenge. Then 6 months later, "Hey, what's the meaning of this? I need money. Do something about it." One day, I received 1,000 voicemail messages from Richard. When I played them back, he was ranting one-sidedly about various things, but I didn't answer the phone and completely ignored him. As the voicemails kept being recorded, my husband must have thought the phone wasn't getting through because he said, "I'm coming over there now." Finally, the time for payback has come. My eyes glittered as I waited for Richard to come home. "Hey, you're here, aren't you?" About 30 minutes after the last call, my husband appeared at the house. "Richard, who came into the living room, looked gaunt, and his voice was hoarse. On the other hand, I was sitting silently in the living room chair with glossy hair and vibrant skin. He was startled by my healthy appearance as he weakly sat down in the chair in front of me. "What do you want now?" I said coldly. My husband fidgeted with the hem of his now baggy clothes and started talking about what had happened. According to him, he had been living off the money he took, but his health kept getting worse, suffering from headaches, nausea, and high fever. Richard quickly went to a new hospital he found where he had moved. However, my husband had forgotten to change his insurance after retiring from the company. "You've always handled the paperwork, but you slacked off. Because of that, I had to pay all the medical expenses out of pocket. You retired on your own and never told me anything about your retirement arrangements. How was I supposed to know you hadn't switched your insurance?" I retorted with a sigh. I had taken care of my own health insurance procedures to match my husband's retirement. When I tried to ask if I should take care of his procedures at the same time, Richard had ignored me. "Well, I thought I'd be fine because I had $150,000 in retirement money anyway." His expression clouded over as he spoke, and he hunched his shoulders. Listening to his story, it seems my husband thought he'd be okay paying for medical treatment out of pocket for a while, feeling flush with cash. However, the new hospital started all the tests from scratch, and with the continued high medical bills, he quickly ran out of money. My husband was grumbling complaints, but suddenly he looked at me and tilted his head. "By the way, I've been thinking since I got here, why do you look so healthy? Didn't you say you were given a year to live 6 months ago? Oh my, didn't the new hospital doctor tell you anything? You seem to have misunderstood, but it's you who has little time left due to illness, not me." I'll never forget my husband's face at that moment. Richard was so shocked that his eyes widened, and he froze like a robot with dead batteries. On that day when the hospital contacted me, the doctor and I had decided that I would tell my husband about his condition. With his limited life expectancy, it was necessary to inform him as soon as possible and at the right timing. "But you wouldn't listen to me at all." "Huh? That was about me? You should have reported it properly. Are you trying to kill me? What could I do when the person who misunderstood that I was sick ignored everything I said and ended up leaving the house?" He was at a loss for words and awkwardly averted his eyes. "Anyway, I need money for treatment. You can get it from Dad's account if you have to and sort out the health insurance." He grimaced in annoyance and pounded his fist on the table. The purpose of the phone calls that had been ringing since morning was to ask for money now. "Now you're after your father-in-law's money too and trying to dump the paperwork on me? You don't think we'd do that for you, do you?" I raised my voice, my eyes blazing with anger. My husband, who had never seen me raise my voice before, trembled with genuine surprise. Besides, there's no way all $150,000 could disappear in just 6 months on hospital bills alone. I took out some photos from an envelope at the edge of the table and laid them out. They showed my husband cuddling with a woman about 10 years younger than him. "I know you've been cheating and wasting money too." Richard peered at the photos as if jolted and clicked his tongue. He clearly hadn't expected his affair to be discovered, so he crossed his arms and clammed up. "I found out about my husband's misdeeds when his subordinate visited our house while I was searching for Richard's whereabouts. He had come to deliver a fountain pen that my husband had forgotten in his company locker when he retired. However, when he saw my face at the door, Richard's subordinate looked confused and asked, 'Is the mistress home?' When I answered, 'I am the wife,' he frowned. As I listened to his story, it turned out that for the past 10 years, since my mother-in-law's care began, my husband had been meeting a woman every day after work. Moreover, Richard had been introducing this woman to others as his wife. The subordinate was shocked to find a different person as the wife when he visited his boss's house. "You've got some nerve playing around with a woman while I was busy with caregiving," I shouted, pointing at the building and the photo on the table. It turns out that when my husband left home, he had moved into his mistress's apartment. After hearing the story from Richard's subordinate, I continued searching for his whereabouts and finally located where he was living just 3 days before he came back. When I found him and his mistress happily entering the apartment together, I was overwhelmed with the urge to catch him and scold him right there and then, but for the sake of divorce and claiming compensation, I hid in the shadows to take photos as evidence of the affair. The frustration and humiliation I felt at that time was heart-wrenching. "Looks like you've been living it up. Trips, expensive shopping, dining at high-end restaurants. It's not just medical expenses." I took out more photos and printouts of credit card usage history from the envelope, revealing what my husband had been doing, cornering him. I'm divorcing someone who not only doesn't value his family but repeatedly betrays them, and I'll be claiming substantial compensation. I glared at my husband with a sharper gaze than his and slammed down the divorce papers. Well, if you're divorcing me, that works out well for me too. I can happily live with my new woman without any trouble. Seeing the divorce papers, my husband smirked as if to say I was a fool and immediately signed them. I snatched up the paper at that moment and tucked it securely into the envelope in my hand. Then I called out towards the room outside, "Father, Richard says he's going to live with his mistress." I don't think that's going to happen. The living room door opened, and my father-in-law, who had been absent until now, appeared. I've already signed the divorce papers, so it's too late now. Even seeing his father's face, my husband laughed smugly. Actually, my father-in-law had been cooperating all along, helping to search for my husband's whereabouts and investigate the affair. When I heard you were coming back, I went to meet your woman. We had a long talk, and I just got back. As my father-in-law spoke with a smile, Richard's face gradually turned pale. So how did it go with the woman? I told her that there are consequences for straying from the path of righteousness. I said we'd be claiming compensation. She must have been quite surprised. I smiled confidently. Only my husband was left sweating and gulping nervously. She cried and begged for forgiveness, saying she'd cut ties with Richard immediately. What did you say? Richard, who had been quiet all this time, suddenly raised his voice. He clearly never imagined he would be the one getting dumped. I sighed and looked at my husband with eyes that said he was beyond help. Father, it seems he doesn't believe it. Then my father-in-law took out his smartphone and started dialing. After the ringtone sounded on the speaker, a woman's voice was heard. My husband immediately called out the woman's name, but the person on the other end started yelling furiously. You said you'd never cause me trouble, but because of you, I have to pay $30,000 in compensation, she ranted, listing her grievances. You were wrong to choose Richard in the first place. Both you and I were, but a sin is a sin. I'll make sure you pay the compensation, I spoke to the mistress in an angry voice. Overwhelmed by my intensity, the woman who had been making a fuss suddenly fell silent. We'll talk through lawyers from now on, I declared, and my father-in-law quietly hung up the phone. Left behind, Richard looked down diagonally with his mouth half open, completely at a loss. My father-in-law and I looked at each other and shrugged. Hey, family is the most important, after all, right? Right. We shouldn't be falling apart like this. Cornered, my husband suddenly stood up from his chair and, on the verge of tears, started begging for reconciliation. Just so you know, the compensation I'll be getting from you is $100,000. That includes the value of my stolen jewelry. When you cheat for 10 years, the compensation gets pretty high. I showed both my hands with palms out and pushed away Richard as he tried to cozy up to me. My husband, who had fallen on his backside in an undignified manner, looked at my father-in-law as if seeking help. It's no use counting on me. I'm cutting ties with you. All the inheritance will go to her. No way. Hey, say something to Dad for me. Brushed off by his father, Richard now tried to sidle up to me. However, I said nothing and just glared at him with ice-cold eyes. Seeing this, my husband seemed to realize it was truly over. He left the house in tears. After that, I immediately submitted the divorce papers and separated from my husband. Richard and his mistress each ended up paying hefty compensation. They didn't help each other out and ultimately broke up. Word on the street is that they both borrowed money from shady sources to pay me, and now they're being chased by debt collectors. After wasting 10 years of everything, all they're left with is debt. What a miserable life. I'm nothing but grateful to my father-in-law who always helped me when things were tough, and I've returned to work as a pharmacist. It's fun to be back at work after so long, and the time I can spend freely outside is refreshing. The neighbors have been worried about me, and we're planning to go on a trip together soon. True friends are worth waiting for. For now, I'm enjoying my own time. Story 4. My daughter fulfilled her dream of studying abroad, but 6 months later I received news of her death. When I went to pay my respects, I found a dirty homeless woman calling me Mom. She was my daughter. Mom. I turned around, startled by the voice, and saw a homeless person in tattered clothes. Unbelievably, it was my daughter, who I thought had died 6 months ago. My 16-year-old daughter had left for a study abroad program, but 2 weeks later, she supposedly died in an accident. I had been in a daze, shocked by the news. Finally, I had pulled myself together enough to visit her study abroad location, and there I had this unexpected reunion. Overwhelmed with surprise and joy, I hugged my daughter while crying. However, What she told me was an unbelievable, shocking truth. My name is Ashley, and I'm 42 years old. I lived with my husband, Daniel, and our daughter, Isabella. I was a full-time housewife, while Daniel worked as a salesman for a large trading company, traveling all over the world. Isabella was a sophomore in high school, studying hard to be recommended for a short-term study abroad program only available to one student in her grade. Isabella studying abroad? Staying in the country is good enough. Look at me. I'm successful without doing anything like that, Daniel said. But wouldn't experiencing a broader world overseas be a good experience? I replied. My husband frowned as soon as he heard me speak, disapproving of our daughter's plans. He had old-fashioned ideas and didn't like women being active in society. In fact, I had quit my job to become a housewife when we got married because he strongly insisted on it. Besides, do you know how much it costs to study abroad? Airfare, tuition, living expenses. You're planning to pay for all of this with the money I earned, aren't you? I have no intention of wasting money like that. After hearing this from my husband, I was at a loss for words. Still, I continued trying to persuade him, desperate to make Isabella's dream come true. Then I'll earn the money for Isabella's study abroad. I'll work part-time and still take care of the house properly. I won't rely on your income. Is that all right? Please. A woman like you working part-time won't earn much. If you slack off on housework even a little, I'll make you quit right away. My husband sneered, but I had finally gotten his permission. From then on, I worked part-time every day, kept the house spotless, cooked perfect meals, and somehow managed to save up for our daughter's study abroad by cutting back on my own food expenses. Eventually, thanks to her efforts, Isabella was chosen as a member of the short-term study abroad program. Even my husband, albeit reluctantly, seemed to have come around to the idea of sending our daughter off. Mom, Dad, I'm off. And so our daughter left with a beaming smile and high spirits. However, tragedy struck suddenly. 2 weeks after our daughter had gone to France for her study abroad, my husband came home from work and rushed over to me with a pale face. Listen calmly. I just got a call from Isabella's school abroad. They said she died in an accident. The moment I heard those words, all strength left my body, and my mind went blank. That can't be. It's a lie, right? I couldn't accept the reality and fainted from the shock. I ended up bedridden for several days due to poor health. For a while, I couldn't think about anything. It felt like I was in a dream. During that time, my husband left me behind and went to our daughter's study abroad location, but I was unable to even get up, so I was left behind. What happened to Isabella? I finally asked my husband about our daughter's situation when he returned home. However, his response was cold. I took care of everything. The funeral was held there too. What? You've already finished everything? What else could I do? You weren't in any state to handle it. The moment I heard my husband's words, I felt a hole open up in my heart, and at the same time, anger began to bubble up inside me. I couldn't be there for my daughter's final moments or say goodbye to her, yet my husband didn't seem to care about my feelings, and he didn't even appear to be grieving. You could have at least contacted me before the funeral. Shut up. Stop lying around and do the housework. How can you talk like that? Isabella is dead now. Get rid of all her stuff. Since then, we stopped talking about our daughter. I couldn't understand how my husband could remain so calm. 6 months later, when I had finally started to come to terms with my feelings a little, I told my husband I was going on a trip with friends to refresh myself. Secretly, I headed to France. I wanted to lay flowers for my daughter at her study abroad location. So this is the town where she spent her time, I thought as I walked through the streets, lost in nostalgia. That's when it happened. Mom. Surprised by the voice calling me, I turned around and saw a homeless person in tattered clothes. For a moment, I was confused, but then I looked closely at the dirty face and realized with a start, Isabella. The girl, terribly thin, with messy hair, and in a pitiful state, was undoubtedly my daughter. Surprise and tears welled up all at once, and my heart started pounding fiercely. You're alive. In this state, what on earth happened? Mom, help me. Hearing her strained voice, I hugged her tightly. It was all his doing. Isabella, unable to even put strength into her body in my arms, started telling me something unbelievable. I could see deep hatred and despair in her eyes as she looked up at me. It's okay. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. I'll protect you now. I felt an intense flame of anger I had never experienced before burning inside me. Later, after returning to our country, I began preparations to take revenge on the person who had hurt my daughter. I thought she wouldn't find peace unless the culprit received a punishment fitting the crime. 2 weeks later, I was sitting across from my husband at a restaurant. It was his birthday. The candlelight on the table flickered gently, creating a special atmosphere. "It's been a while since we've eaten out, just the two of us," he said. He had been in a good mood throughout the meal and let out a contented sigh after finishing dessert. "This is your birthday present." "Open it," I said, handing him a large book. "Is this an album?" "Yes, I put together all our memories in one book." I smiled sweetly as my husband opened the album with great interest. "Did you make this?" "It's amazing." "Oh, there are even photos from before we got married." My husband's voice was unusually excited as he continued turning the pages. "This is our wedding, and this is our honeymoon." His expression gradually softened as if recalling past memories. "Is this when Isabella was born?" "Huh." However, as soon as he looked at the next page, his expression clouded over. I didn't miss this change and inwardly smirked. "What's wrong?" My husband turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. No wonder, because with each turn of the page, intimate photos of him with his mistress appeared one after another, pictures of him enjoying meals with women other than me, walking hand in hand. These were photos of his affairs that I had painstakingly collected from the day I returned from France until today. My husband was clearly averting his gaze, seemingly trying to think of an excuse. "Why are these here? More importantly, who is this woman?" "This is just a colleague." "It's some kind of misunderstanding." "Oh, really? You look awfully close for just colleagues." I calmly refuted his words. "We're involved in the same project, so we often end up together." Even at this time, I was just listening to her work troubles. My husband, still thinking he could get away with it at this point, kept making excuses. "I suppose if it was a serious consultation, you'd need to be in a private room, right?" I calmly turned to the next page, where there was a large photo of my husband and his mistress entering a hotel. The blood drained further from my husband's face, and his mouth trembled. "You're wearing your wedding ring in the photo, aren't you? Doesn't this woman know you're married?" As I stared straight at my husband and pressed him with an icy cold voice, he finally seemed to give up. With tears welling up in his eyes, he gripped my hand tightly. "I'll confess. After Isabella died, I went crazy and had an affair. It was just a moment of weakness. Please believe me." Indeed, the photos pasted in the album were all from after our daughter had gone. "You must have been in pain too, losing our daughter." "That's right. It felt like I'd lost an arm, and I wanted to escape reality." Misunderstanding that I was showing understanding, he quickly tried to match my tone. I whispered such lies to my husband and quietly took out my smartphone. "Then who do you think took this video?" Seeing it, he stared at the screen for a while with an expression that seemed to say he couldn't believe it. "This is a video of you with her in France, isn't it? Were you on a business trip together? You must have been busy to have a date during that time." My husband, who had been dumbfounded for a while, suddenly seemed to have an idea and grabbed me with tremendous force. "How long have you been watching me? Hiring a detective? I can't believe it." Taking advantage of being in a private room, my husband raised his voice. He deliberately made a loud noise by slamming the album on the table, but I didn't flinch. "I'm going to call the person who took this video now, so let's talk, the three of us." Saying this, I made a phone call to a certain person. "Don't be ridiculous. What are you planning to do by calling such a person? Are you enjoying cornering me?" As he grew increasingly irritated, I calmly hung up the phone and waited for that moment to come. Everything will be clear now. A few seconds later, the door to the private room opened, and a woman entered. "Dad, it's been a while." Incredibly, it was our daughter, Isabella. "Why are you here? You were supposed to be in France." Shocked, my husband almost let slip the biggest secret he had been hiding from me for 6 months. He immediately made a face that said, "Oh no," and fell silent, but I didn't miss it. "That's right. Isabella was supposed to have died in France because of you." "That's not true." My husband was trembling, holding his head in his hands. Faced with him, our daughter quietly began to speak. I was really surprised then. I never expected to encounter Dad's affair in my study abroad location. "Shut up. Be quiet. But when you found out that I had taken that video just now, you were afraid your affair would be exposed. So enough already." You tried to silence Isabella several times, interrupting her words, but our daughter didn't stop. "You took away my phone and wallet and deliberately drove me far away in a car and abandoned me." Yes, this was the shocking truth I had heard from my daughter that day in France. The story about Isabella's death was all my husband's lie. I couldn't believe that my husband would do such a thing just to hide his affair. Isabella had set up her phone to automatically save data to the internet in case it was stolen. My husband seemed to think that taking away our daughter's phone would be enough, but I had managed to retrieve all the evidence. Isabella didn't die in an accident. You put her through something terrible. That's a misunderstanding, right? Isabella, help me out here. He spread his arms like a father trying to hug our daughter, but she strongly pushed his hands away. Back then, I begged for help many times, didn't I? Weren't you the one who ignored that? Our daughter said. After that, she walked for days to return to where her study abroad school was, only to find that my husband had already completed her withdrawal procedures and cleared out her dormitory. Isabella, whose French wasn't that good yet, had no close friends or anyone to consult with. Not knowing what to do, she sat dazed in a park until a kind homeless woman helped her, and she managed to survive until meeting me. I can't think of you as my father anymore. I'll never forgive you. Isabella, who had survived the 6 months until reuniting with me with a strong determination to return home, glared sharply at my husband. That's why it's a misunderstanding. If we talk, you'll understand. Are you still going to play innocent? Let's have the police judge whether it's a misunderstanding or not. I'm smarter than you too. I'll escape using any means necessary. His emotions running high, he seemed to have forgotten he was in a restaurant and started yelling and throwing spoons and forks at me. No, with this much clear evidence, it'll be fine. What can you, who've only worked part-time and know nothing of the world, possibly do? Hearing these words, I remembered the real reason I wanted to support our daughter's study abroad. Every day being belittled by my husband, saying, "What would a housewife like you understand?" I wanted our daughter to see the wider world in my place. I realized I had been projecting my own dreams onto her. Don't underestimate me. I clenched my fist and glared sharply at my husband. As if overwhelmed by this atmosphere, he stopped moving, and at that moment, the sound of police sirens could be heard in the distance. Actually, before calling Isabella into the room, I had asked her to notify the police. Well, it looks like your escort has arrived. Let's continue this conversation at the police station. You're kidding, right? Did you really call the police? Are you trying to make your own husband a criminal? I'm divorcing you, so it doesn't matter what happens to you. Wait a minute. I was wrong. I'll change from now on, so please don't say we're separating and let's forget about the police. I silently brushed off my husband, who was clinging to me and crying. He then tried to cling to our daughter, but of course, she rejected him. Having given up, he collapsed to his knees on the spot. Afterwards, my husband received a prison sentence for endangering our underage daughter and was fired from his company with disciplinary action. I divorced him and demanded $20,000 in compensation. I also demanded $10,000 from his mistress. Their relationship quickly spread throughout the company, and it seems the mistress found it difficult to stay there. After completing her payment to me, she soon quit the company and left my ex-husband's side. My ex-husband was cut off by his parents and had nowhere to go, and I hear he's now homeless. Isabella returned to her studies in France and began walking towards her dreams again. And I too was able to find a new job. Isabella's attitude of trying to see the world with a broad perspective gave me courage. Now I'm busy for myself, but my days are fulfilling. Story 5. My husband left our 3-year-old daughter on the balcony and went golfing. I disciplined her. When my husband returned home and looked down from the balcony, the ground was stained bright red because I've disciplined our daughter. Those were the words my husband proudly declared when I called to check on him while he was babysitting our 2-year-old daughter. What do you mean? He went on to explain that because she wouldn't stop crying, he had locked her out on the balcony, and then, if you can believe it, he'd gone off to play golf. We live on the 10th floor of an apartment building. I felt the blood drain from my face. That evening, when my husband returned home, he was in for a hellish surprise. Our daughter wasn't on the balcony, and when he peered over the railing, he saw the ground below stained a deep red. I met my husband, Tyler, through a mutual friend. He was 10 years my senior, but I was drawn to his seemingly nurturing nature. Tyler treated me like I was precious, and our relationship progressed smoothly from dating to marriage. Being with him was the happiest event of my life up to that point, and I never doubted that this happiness would continue. But that bliss was short-lived. A few months after we got married, Tyler started spending less and less time at home, always citing work as the reason. He'd come home after midnight every night, and sometimes he wouldn't come home for days without so much as a phone call. I knew from our dating days that being the president of his own company was demanding, but before we were married, he'd frequently ask me out on dates and was the type to send messages often, even when busy, so I couldn't help but feel the stark difference after our marriage. However, at Tyler's request, I had quit my job as a nurse to become a full-time housewife when we got married. Because of this, I couldn't bring myself to complain to him when he was working so hard. Then, unexpectedly, I found out I was pregnant. The tiny life growing inside me, conceived with the husband I loved so dearly, was incredibly precious. Thoughts of our soon-to-be-born child helped ease my loneliness. Some time passed, and I safely gave birth to our daughter, Olivia. While I was overjoyed with our beautiful baby girl, Tyler's lifestyle remained unchanged. Him not being home due to work had become the norm, and on the rare occasions he was home, he'd either be sleeping in the bedroom or lounging around with his smartphone, never bothering to interact with or care for our daughter. To top it off, he'd leave me and Olivia behind on weekends to go golfing, his favorite hobby. Before we were married, my husband had said he loved children and was looking forward to raising them together, but his behavior now showed no signs of that enthusiasm. My parents lived far away, so I couldn't easily rely on them for help. I was struggling through first-time motherhood all alone. Not only that, but my husband was gradually becoming more domineering. He became particular about housework, our daughter's education, and discipline, demanding that I be the perfect wife and mother. "Is this all you've made for dinner? There's not enough variety." Tyler would complain about the meal I'd prepared when he came home late at night. "I'm sorry, but it's frustrating when you don't tell me what time you'll be home, or even if you're coming home at all. I'm sleep-deprived from Olivia's night crying, so I'd like to go to bed early when I can. Is that any way to talk to the man who's working to support you? Who do you think puts food on the table? You're at home all day, so taking care of the child, the house, and supporting your husband are the least you can do." Got it. My frustrations with my husband were mounting, but voicing them only led to him yelling and shutting me down. I tried to convince myself that enduring this and maintaining peace in our home was for Olivia's sake. There were days when I felt like I couldn't go on, but seeing my daughter's sweet smile gave me the strength to keep pushing forward. However, an incident occurred that made me fear I might not be able to continue this daily struggle. When Olivia was about 2 years old, I had a routine health checkup where they found something abnormal. When I rushed to the hospital, they told me, "We can't say anything definitive without more detailed tests, so you should have a thorough examination." I made an appointment for the following week. However, the examination would take all day, and I couldn't bring my 2-year-old daughter with me. I tried to arrange temporary childcare or a babysitter, but it was too last minute, and they were all fully booked. My mother was elderly and not in good health, so I couldn't ask her to come all the way to our house to look after Olivia. As I was racking my brain trying to figure out what to do, Tyler surprisingly said, "I guess I'll have to look after our daughter." I was shocked that my husband would offer such a thing, but I had an even bigger worry. Could Tyler really spend even just one day alone with Olivia? He had never once taken care of our daughter before, so I was extremely concerned. However, at that point, there was no other option, so I decided to trust him and leave Olivia in his care. On the day of my examination, I woke up early, wrote down instructions for taking care of our daughter in a way that even my husband could understand, prepared their meals, and made sure everything was perfectly set up. "Taking care of a kid is easy," Tyler said with a yawn, looking completely relaxed. I left for the hospital feeling uneasy about leaving my daughter behind. Even during the examination, I couldn't stop worrying about Olivia. Did he change her diaper? Did he feed her properly? I was so preoccupied that I couldn't even focus on the fact that I might have a serious illness. When there was a break during the tests, I decided to call my husband to check on things. After several rings, Tyler finally picked up. "Is Olivia okay? Are you managing to take care of her?" "Everything's fine. I've disciplined her." "Good, what? What do you mean?" I immediately asked, not understanding what he was talking about. "I thought I could just let the kid play by herself, but she wouldn't stop crying because of your bad parenting, so I taught her a lesson by locking her out on the balcony." My husband proudly told me this outrageous thing. "What are you thinking? We live on the 10th floor. You're overreacting. This is all because you haven't disciplined her properly." I had so many things I wanted to say to Tyler, but Olivia's safety was the top priority. "Bring Olivia back inside right now." "I can't. I'm out right now. I'm busy." But my husband hung up without a hint of remorse. Hearing his words, I felt the blood drain from my face. I immediately halted the examination and rushed home in a taxi. "Please let her be safe." When I arrived at our apartment, I opened the door with shaking hands. Stumbling down the hallway, I threw open the balcony window at the back of the living room. What I saw was my daughter in a terrible state. Seeing this, I decided to get revenge on my husband and put a certain plan into action. That evening, Tyler returned home. Olivia must have learned her lesson by now, he said carelessly, humming as he opened the window. He seemed to be looking for our daughter, frantically glancing left and right. Why? It can't be. Tyler fearfully leaned over the railing to look down. He then screamed and stumbled backward. My husband was visibly shaking, clearly in shock. Well, I suppose it's time for me to make my appearance. I had been hiding in the kitchen, watching Tyler's reaction. I'm home. Thanks for babysitting. I emerged in front of my husband, acting as if I had just returned. Oh, you're back. It's terrible. Olivia might have fallen from the balcony. What? You mean what you said on the phone earlier was serious? I thought it must have been some kind of joke. According to him, there was a bright red stain on the ground directly below the balcony. I rushed out to the window to look. When I screamed, Tyler broke out in a cold sweat and became even more flustered. It's Olivia's fault for not listening to me at all. That's no excuse. What were you doing all this time? Well, I went out to play golf. Are you kidding me? We need to call an ambulance right away. As I took out my phone from my pocket to dial 911, my husband shouted, "Stop," and snatched the phone away from me. If you do that, it'll cause a huge commotion and everyone will find out. I'll be blamed. It's not my fault. This happened because your discipline is lacking. Figure out what to do yourself. He finally snapped and tried to shift the blame onto me. Even in a situation where our daughter's life could be in danger, he was only thinking about covering for himself. His attitude pushed me to my breaking point. You're truly the worst. I've already saved Olivia long ago. What? You mean? The truth is, when I rushed home after that phone call with Tyler, I found our daughter collapsed on the balcony. I scooped her up and rushed her to the hospital. After an examination, Olivia was diagnosed with dehydration and immediately admitted. If I hadn't cut my tests short, I shudder to think what might have happened. I wanted to see how my husband would react, so I had spread ketchup mixed with water on the ground below the balcony to make him think Olivia had fallen. Upon hearing my explanation, his face turned red with anger, and he came at me, but I didn't flinch, glaring right back at him. Do you have any right to be angry? You abandoned our daughter to go have fun, didn't you? What do you mean you went on a golf date with Amanda, didn't you? Wait a minute. How did you? To be honest, I had suspected my husband of cheating ever since shortly after our daughter was born, given how often he was away from home. Then a certain person contacted me. She introduced herself as Amanda and said she worked at my husband's company. I started receiving persistent phone calls and messages from her saying, "Please break up with Tyler," which confirmed my suspicions about my husband's infidelity. I could have filed for divorce immediately if I wanted to, but our daughter was still very young at the time, so I felt I needed to prepare carefully. During this period, I had been gathering evidence of how terribly he had treated me and how utterly unhelpful he had been with childcare, all to ensure a favorable divorce settlement. Amanda kept trying to show me how lovey-dovey she and Tyler were. According to her, all those times I thought my husband was away for work were actually dates and trips with her. So I assumed the errand he went out for after locking our daughter out was just another date with Amanda. Hearing my words, Tyler was clearly flustered, not knowing that Amanda had been in contact with me. I have enough evidence of your affair. Please divorce me. I presented my husband with divorce papers, but he angrily refused, his face turning red. Amanda is just a fling. It's ridiculous to divorce over something like that. And what about my social standing? I've been supporting you, so you should just shut up and do as I say. Tyler rattled off his one-sided arguments and started coming towards me. You can't seriously think such selfish reasoning will work. Besides, I'm going to report how you treated Olivia this time. I confronted my husband, staring him down, but he just smirked at me as if mocking my words. Olivia ended up being fine, didn't she? She was just playing on the balcony by herself and felt unwell. That's all there is to it. There's no evidence that I did anything wrong. He declared this with a triumphant expression. Are you serious? Do you really think that after enduring your mistreatment all this time and diligently gathering evidence, I would slip up at the very end? I took something out of my pocket and showed it to my husband. When did you? After taking our daughter to the hospital, I had hidden a voice recorder in my pocket, wanting to get some decisive testimony from my husband. I had recorded everything from the moment he came home until this very instant. I'm planning to take this to the police. What you did to Olivia is a clear crime. Faced with my unwavering stern attitude, my husband became visibly shaken, sweat beading on his forehead. Please, anything but that. I was wrong. I'm sorry for everything. His attitude changed completely from moments ago, and Tyler uttered words of apology for the first time. He got down on his knees, begging me to forgive him. However, even seeing my husband in such a state didn't shake my resolve. How could I possibly forgive you for putting our precious daughter in danger? You're a failure both as a husband and as a parent. I looked down at Tyler, rejecting him with those words, and left the house to go to the police, leaving him behind. Afterward, my husband was questioned, and based on the evidence I submitted, he was arrested. This incident was covered in local news and on social media, causing his company to lose all credibility and go bankrupt. Both Tyler and Amanda lost their jobs as a result. Through my lawyer, I finalized the divorce from my husband and demanded $120,000 for alimony due to his infidelity and child support. Furthermore, I sued Amanda, his mistress, for $220,000 in damages. Olivia was able to leave the hospital without any issues and is now living a healthy life. I also underwent a thorough medical examination and was relieved to be given a clean bill of health. I've since returned to work as a nurse, and I'm looking forward to living freely and happily with my daughter from now on.